How are you doing, ma'am?
I am doing well. A little
Doing well.
tired.
A little tired? Oh, no, it
A
can't be
little
tired.
tired, but
Hey, you look like
it's
you sound like you're under the weather.
allergies.
Ah,
And
spring, right? Spring hit that quick, and
spring.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So all right, let's go back to Hillary Clinton and AIPAC. Her tone, her rhetoric, particularly compared to the speech that Bernie Sanders gave today. What did you think? Go.
She sounded like, she was rounding up the troops, for battle on a particular side. I mean, I cautioned a lot of people like over the weekend for making a big deal out of the fact that Bernie Sanders did not go speak.
Right.
Because it wasn't that he did not speak. It's just that it wasn't that he was like, no, I object for these various moral reasons. I mean, we as Bernie supporters, everyone has to be really careful with this moral superiority. Like our candidate did this.
Yeah.
Well, he's losing a race right now, so he really does actually need to be on the trail. It's very interesting, though, as someone else pointed out to me earlier, how AIPAC in the past has allowed, participants to speak, via live stream. I believe Mitt Romney did it previously.
Yep.
And Bibi Netanyahu is also doing it, is also speaking via live stream. So the fact that they refused to allow Bernie to do it was interesting. But at the same time, they're not necessarily their interests. Everyone's like, well, Bernie's the Jewish candidate. I've even seen certain so-called Black leftist leaders call him a Zionist. There's all types of misinformation out there. So it's very interesting, since Bernie's the supposed Zionist, when you see their positions today, like fully laid out. Bernie has made different comments on the trail, but he hasn't really come down very decisively in any way.
Mhm.
He's said that it's a difficult situation. It's not very cut and dry, but he does support a two-state solution. I mean, so here's the thing. By saying that, well, Hillary is not in line with Netanyahu because she supports a two-state solution.
Right.
That's the American position. She's trying to be president of the United States of America. So whether she really, truly believes in a two-state solution or not, and you have to question the veracity of those statements to an extent where it basically is like Israel has the absolute right to do whatever it wants to whoever it wants. I mean, the tone of her speech, the words used seem to basically indict Palestinians for their condition. I don't know that anywhere else in history do we blame the suffering of a people. Well, at least in our modern history, I don't know where we blame the suffering and human rights abuses of a people on those people and blame them as if they're oppressing their actual oppressors. Like the tone of her whole speech. And so here's the thing, like Ben asked me kind of my personal viewpoint on this earlier. So my personal viewpoint is this. Israel is here. There's nothing we can do about it. Israel exists. We can get into the history. We can get into debates about whether it's right or wrong for Israel to exist, but it does, right? However, Palestine and Palestinians have an absolute right to exist because they have existed, they do exist, and what has been happening the past, 60, almost 70 years now, is absolutely atrocious. I mean, so we have to have a reasonable solution to addressing this situation. It's uncalled for that a key U.S. ally is a country we call our friend, a country we provide more support to than we do to many of our own, communities here, receive so much aid and unconditional support despite having so many, whether it's security conflict, Security Council resolutions against it, human rights abuses, all types of stuff, and they all go unenforced. Secretary Clinton has said that she is not necessarily in favor of, Security Council intervention. There's so many different levels that's so problematic with her position.
Let me jump right there, because I want to realize is that Donald Trump said essentially the same thing, that he didn't want this intervention to come from the United Nations. I mean, he made the big
some of the points that I saw, like the counterpoints. There's a really good piece I read earlier from Ben Norton, and he has some good tweets. There's another good piece from Al Jazeera. There's some really good tweets and some good information out there I saw earlier. But it was interesting to note that not only do they have similar positions, but she's actually first to the right of him on this.
Yes.
And you know, we're like, oh, they're both progressives, they're both the same. We just need a Democrat. We're talking about foreign policy, and I think like was being said earlier, like foreign policy is definitely important, but at the same time, that judgment, you know, when we're talking about going forward, and when we're talking about what is needed going forward, the type of attitude, the type of management, the type of leadership we need going into a Mid-East, you know, a new presidency in the Mid-East. Hillary Clinton sounded like she was ready to, you know, to plunge us into whatever holy war Israel under Netanyahu feels that it needs to wage. So I really don't. I hear her on the two-state solution part. Right. I mean, that has been the long-standing position in the United States of America. But at the same time, I think when Bernie talks about how in friendships it's difficult, and you can't just say, "Well, that's my friend no matter what." Right. That's not the responsible thing to do. I think that's it's a very sobering position, I think, as we talk about moving forward.
There's a quote by George Washington, and it's the essence of it. I'm looking it up now, but the essence of it is it was his warning. I think it was either his farewell speech or his second inaugural address, where he warned America from forming these everlasting, for lack of a better word, ties and friendships because exactly that. Now, if you say that with regard to Israel, you know, then all of a sudden you become an enemy of Israel, of course, from the propaganda machine that wants absolutism, right? You know, you're either for us or you're against us. But if you look at that nuance that came even from George damn Washington, right, that's not something that we apply when it comes to Israel. And that's what we saw today. Hillary Clinton got on stage and fed that audience everything that they wanted to hear, with maybe the exception of the two-state solution, but she fed them, and you would have thought that she's ready to do whatever needs to be done to pacify and to satisfy AIPAC, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think the other thing too that was very interesting, the step that she took, which actually is something that she wrote about, I think it was back in July this summer. She wrote a letter basically renouncing the divestment movement here in the United States. Like, if anyone's familiar with divestment in terms of South Africa, there's a similar movement that's been going on, I think, since like 2005, 2006. And it's had increasing popularity on college campuses in particular, as with the divestment from fossil fuel movement. I mean, there's a movement in terms of looking at the human rights abuses, and many people have compared what is happening in the state of Israel to apartheid South Africa. When we talk about the subjugation, discrimination, and oppression of a group of people. Now, I understand conversely, you know, that the daily lives of Israeli citizens, some by other accounts would say that they're interrupted, that actions taken by Hamas and other groups, you know, disrupt and threaten security, disrupt and threaten peace and safe living. But on the flip side, when you have, you know, men and women and grandmothers and workers who still have the keys to houses who have long since been demolished in illegal settlements, and they're called illegal settlements because they're against various agreements, international agreements, you know, that have been brokered as a part of attempts to have a peace. You know, when you have these things going on, and the U.S. is just like, yep, that's my boy, can't say anything, don't know anything about that. I mean, it's problematic. You know, even when you look at the death tolls, right? Like, okay, well, they're killing Israelis. Yeah, but they've killed like 4 or 5 times as many Palestinians, whether it's from direct military intervention or if it's from like people being starved out. I mean, lack of access to various goods and services. I mean, there's so many different problems. And I think what's really interesting too is, like, you would think that people like Netanyahu, because remember when he came to Congress, he was in the middle of a fierce battle at home, right? And there are quite a few moderates. There are quite a few people who do not support him, do not support his brand of doing things. So Hillary Clinton is speaking to and backing a very specific segment of Israeli society when she's like throwing all in. What I think was really like this summed it up very well for me. Gideon Levy, right, who's an Israeli columnist, he said, the drug addict who is your friend, if you give him money, he will really care about you. But are you really caring about him? When he was asked about the 50-year-old illegal military occupation, that he himself, there are people who are Jewish Israelis because let's remember that there are Arab American and not Arab Americans. Sorry, guys, allergies. But there are Arab citizens of Israel. But he himself, there are many people who believe that what is happening and how the Israeli government is acting to basically crush, Palestinian existence is wrong. That there's an international movement, against it, and the U.S. is one of the main, supporters of upholding the system without any real checks and balances. So to say we believe in a two-state solution, but it's put absolutely squarely at the feet of the oppressed, it's problematic. It's like saying we're in favor of slavery. I mean, we're in favor of freeing the slaves, but the slaves has to do X, Y, and Z before they can get their freedom. Like, I mean, if we're saying that we're in favor of, at the same time, she'll come back and give a speech about Arizona this evening and complain about the treatment of people by the Maricopa County sheriff, whose name I never get right. But that disconnect, like it's pandering of the worst kind, because how can you say you care about this group of people right here, really, because you need their votes?
Right.
And just earlier today, you basically upheld and endorsed the same exact type of behavior, by one of our allies.
What drives me crazy about it is two things. Two things drives me crazy about it. One, she didn't have to do that. Right? So it really comes down to whether or not this is something that she genuinely believes, right? That the problem is something that the Palestinian people need to fix. Right. And that they have to address their problems first before we even address the issues that are coming from the current and previous regimes there in Israel. Right. So that was problem number one. But then problem number two is that she, like you said, she not only threw the Palestinian people under the bus, but she threw the more moderate and progressive voices in Israel under the bus. And she threw the American progressives and left under the bus. The people who are participating in these divestment movements here in the United States, the people who stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people from the left, from the progressive side of the equation. She threw the entire global left progressive people who are fighting for human rights, fighting against the human rights violations in Palestine, people who just, like you said, the two-state solution is the starting condition, but she threw everyone under the bus to pander to this particular lobby. And she did not have
this also relitigates the issue about campaign finance reform, right?
Yeah.
Because she gets a certain amount of funding, support, donorship. This is not a group that Bernie gets money from, really. She does get money and support. She one of the major contributors is the owner of Univision, right? And she, like, her July letter basically denouncing, like and that's the thing, like a lot of people get all like confused and stuff like that, and like, oh well, I had no clue because you weren't looking at her platform, because she hasn't changed on this issue. You just haven't been paying attention. I think like somebody was talking online, was saying like, she was so busy hugging Obama so tight. That's the other thing, right? Let's just look, because before I get to Bernie, and he's not without criticism, but a lot better. But she's been hugging Obama. Ooh, Obama's my best friend. Me and Barry go way back. We like Ace Boom Coon. But she just sat there and talked about how neutrality is not, okay. She talked about how, Netanyahu is my best friend. And so all of a sudden she gets in a completely different venue. And now the same man that just disrespected our president not too long ago and went around his back with the Republicans that consorted with the Republicans, now all of a sudden that's her best friend. Well, it's not all of a sudden. They have a long-term, amicable relationship. And I'm just like, either you're going to be, if you are Obama's heir, her doubling down on Israel, and it's not even necessary. Like, this is the thing, right? The United States of America gives the state of Israel like $3.1 or $3.2 billion in unrestricted military aid every single year. That's just military aid, right? So quite honestly, what is done by the Israeli military is really with the U.S. blessing and by the giving of the aid. We could put strings, we could put pressure on the state of Israel to do better, and we don't. And we need different leadership for
because
that.
That's the power. That's the power of the lobby. That's the power of AIPAC. That's the power of campaign. I'm glad you tied that in there, because that is the power of campaign contributions. And the thing is that there are so many voices from the Jewish community that are not there. There's just so many voices that she kind of crapped on today from the Jewish community, that it was such an exercise in political futility, because it was something that she's not going to get a net marginal political benefit from. She's not going to gain more support for many reasons because of a speech like this. So it goes back down to the question from that Slate article: what was the real impetus? Was it genuine belief? Or was it pandering of the worst kind? Either way, it's really disturbing. Let's grab this caller, 917. Thanks so much for your patience. What's your name, comment, and/or question?